This is the Film Grinders Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Hauke. Me, Jacob Hall, and David Hollinshead talk all things NFL, mock drafts, prospect profiles, free agency, and everything else going on in the pro football world. We all hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. We're going to talk receivers today. Dave has his top 10 list. He's watched all the All-22 coaches film. You need playmakers in today's pass-first league. Dave knows all about that. Dave, what kind of receivers do you look for when you're scouting for the NFL process?
Guys who have the because they typically have the flexibility that they can play on the outside as well. So like your typical 6'1", 210 Z receivers, Z receivers, sorry. We're not the 51st state yet. Typical Z receivers can kind of have that inside-outside flexibility, route running technicians, and that's how they get their separation, and run like running backs with the ball in their hand. Keenan Allen is kind of in his prime, obviously, would be like my poster child for my favorite kind of receiver.
Okay. I love Keenan Allen. Nasty routes, gets open. No run after the catch ability with that.
No, with Keenan Allen, unfortunately, but no. I would say between A.J. Brown and Keenan Allen, if they could have a baby, that would be my top receiver.
That would be kind of every quarterback's dream, hey?
I guess so, yeah, you're right. But if you remember, no one's going to get this reference, but like a Brian Burnham would be like my top receiver for you CFL fans out there.
Do love me some Brian Burnham. All right, let's get going here. Dave, we're going to go from number 10. We're going to finish with number 1. Who's your number 10?
My number 10, going to hurt you, and I might have him lower down the board the more I think about it, is Tez Johnson out of Oregon.
Yeah.
5'10", clocked in 155 pounds, ran kind of like a slug at the combine. But the things that you look for with Tez Johnson is how shifty he is. You put the ball in his hands, and we've seen him do great. We've seen Tank Dell in Houston do productive things, and that's kind of my comp for him, just without the downfield speed. His shiftiness, he explodes to his top speed, which isn't that much, but he gets from 0 to 60 real quick. Mm-hmm. And despite his size, he actually does have solid hands and body control. His little body, he can control it very well. But of course, he struggles against press coverage. If you put him on a 6'2" physical kind of DB, I think that just completely washes him out. So he's kind of stuck playing off the line. He has an okay release package, so as long as he's off the line, he should be okay. And he doesn't really come back to the ball. He doesn't really make plays out of structure. He just gets kind of lost in those kind of situations. And when he does get targeted on those, he more or less ends up dropping it, probably because he knows he's gonna get hit. I'm just not super high on him. I think he would do well in like who doesn't do well in an Andy Reid type system, but like that kind of system where you can just kind of creatively give him space to work. And I think there's just too many of those. If he does this, if you put him in this situation, for me to really have him higher up on this ranking list.
Yeah, that's fair. One thing I will say, like being an Oregon fan and watching him, his game speed is better than what he charted at the combine. Like I think I think that's fair to say. But again, like he does not have top end speed, and that's very apparent. He does not have a big stature, so it's going to be tough for him, right? What do you think his ceiling is?
I think his ceiling is kind of like a Tank Dell. You're not going to see him in your base packages. You're going to use him very sparingly. I think just even his body wouldn't hold up to being a high volume target, right? I think you just bring him in these little packages. You have designed plays that are specifically for him, and he'll do fine with it. Maybe as like your wide receiver 4, and just in that very role specific thing. And I think he could do really well in that role and like be worth a long career, but we'll see, right?
for me, my player comp for him is Jamison Crowder, a
No.
guy who had a bunch of productive years, kind of went under the radar because it was with bad teams. He was with the Commanders when they weren't very good. He's still with the Commanders. He came back, but he
Yeah.
was with them when they weren't great. With the Jets when they were, they're
The
the
Jets.
Jets, unfortunately, right? So, but a guy that does not really have top end speed, but he's kind of that shifty jitterbug type that gets open and just finds a way despite not having big stature. So I can see him being a productive player. But again, like, yeah, there's a lot of concerns there. And I understand teams being very wary of that. So I think number 10 is probably a good spot for him. I would agree with you there. So Tez Johnson, Dave's number 10.
It
Number nine,
really
Dave.
is. And I'll give an honorable mention as well to Jaden Higgins, who is probably my real number 10 as the everything keeps playing out. My comp for him is kind of lazy just because of the name, but he is kind of the T. Higgins, stereotypical X receiver. Put him on the outside, and he'll win your X balls.
Right. Which is not your type of receiver, typically.
Not my kind of guy, but there's certainly
There's
a
value.
role for him.
There's a lot of value there. That's my type of receiver personally. So
Yeah, of course it is.
yeah. So Tez Johnson is Dave's number 10. Dave, you're number 9.
My number 9 is Jalen Royals out of Utah State. He doesn't have a lot of film for his 2024 season. He had an injury that kind of cut it short, so that's also gonna lower his draft value. But in his 8 games, he had 840 yards on 55 catches. So like that's nothing
Right.
to just turn your nose up at. And when he played Boise State, which not an elite program, but they did make the college playoffs.
Yeah.
He had 9 catches for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like he's just a big play threat. You can throw him a slant, he could take it to the house. He is a weapon at any area of the field. He has good football IQ. He can adjust in zones. He's a good hands catcher. He can make those contested catches. He is kind of my receiver, 6 feet tall, 205 pounds. He's a former track star. He's got the speed that he can threaten downfield. I love guys who can run a good corner out, and he runs a great corner out. He makes he creates good leverage. He has quick breaks. But he did have a limited route tree. I think the corner route, wheel route were kind of the 2 things that they asked for him over and over and over again. I could see him being like a Jaden Reed type. He's not quite your number 1, but you put him in like a stable of good receivers. He causes missed tackles. You put him all over the field, and he'll be a threat for you for sure.
Nice. So to kind of paraphrase what you said, because I haven't been able to watch a lot on him,
Sure.
like a guy
There's
that
not
might
much to
not
watch.
have, well, yeah, a guy that hasn't really played high levels of competition, but you can see the tools that are there. It might be somewhat limited with the route tree and everything, but like this is a guy that you think can develop and can showcase his talents against top competition.
Yeah, he's hardly a finished project too, which can either be intriguing because he hasn't hit his ceiling yet, but you could also say, is he worth taking in the first, second round if he's not finished, right? So I think like a 3rd round, 4th round might be where he ends up, and I think that's fine. And if he can produce the way he did for Utah State of all teams, you'll be happy with what you're getting there.
Okay, so Jaden Reed's the ceiling. Who's the floor?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have like a player comp for a floor, but the floor would be that he just doesn't either A, whether it be injuries, or B, just can't run precise, intricate routes at the next level and just can't get open. And then you end up having him more of a Tank Dell, Tez Johnson type where you're trying to scheme him touches just because he has such athleticism. I don't see him like completely busting like at all, but his worst would be like a wide receiver 4, and that just doesn't see the field all that often.
All right. That's your number 9. Number 8, Dave.
Number 8 for me would be Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. Now, he is, again, your prototypical X receiver, 6'3", 210. He's almost eclipsed 1,000 yards twice, which you kind of want your top receivers to be having that kind of production, right? You want to see someone eclipse the 1,000-yard mark. That's kind of just where you put it, especially in such a QB-friendly throw the ball offense. He has great hands. He plucks the ball out of the air. He's a very Brandon LaFell type player, right? Like he'll never have that elite production, but he will do what you need from him from that X. He makes catches over the middle. You throw him the 10, 15-yard digs, and he'll come down with it more often than not. But that's also part of the issue is that he had such limited routes. Like they were all just either back shoulder fades, slants, or in breaking routes, right? So you're not asking him to threaten too much outside the numbers or even inside the numbers on outbreaking routes, right? He also doesn't have elite speed, right? So he's not going to torch anybody. He's not an elite route runner. And despite his size, he kind of struggled against press coverage. So that's something that will need to either get developed with some sort of release packages. But you would think a guy like that would be able to get off that. But unfortunately not. But down the field, again, kind of a 3rd, 4th round pick, I think he'd be just fine.
Yeah, what you're describing just really kind of describes Ole Miss receivers, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, kind of that same thing, right? Limited route
Jonathan
tree.
Mingo,
yeah, limited route tree, solid athletes, not like top end speed by any means, but you can just good X's. And then obviously Metcalf and Brown have really developed their game and become stars in the NFL. So maybe that's a path for him. Obviously,
maybe, but I would say that DK was still very strong physically and still crazy. I think that you're underselling what good athletes AJ Brown and DK Metcalf are, because AJ Brown is great. Like you give him the ball in his hands and I'm not going to say unstoppable, but very tough to stop, right?
He's more of like a power after the catch guy though, right? Like he's not a burner by any means. He has good speed, but it's all about he's tough to bring down.
He'll fall forward and pick you up an extra 2 yards.
Yeah.
But he's not going to break tackles and all of a sudden take one to the house.
Okay. That's fair. Maybe like an Alshon Jeffrey type guy.
Yeah.
In breakers, fades, not great after the catch, but like has things that he does very well, is just somewhat limited. And Alshon Jeffrey probably at his peak was, I don't know, you could maybe say top 15, top 10 at his peak back in the day.
Yeah, you can make that argument for sure.
Yeah.
He also has a bit of an injury concern, missed a lot of 2024, kind of hit it. Maybe if he didn't have those injury concerns, he would have clipped 1,000, but that's also a thing that might drop him down the board a little bit. Right, so if your team's in need of a chain mover X receiver, I think that's your guy.
All right, Trey Harris, number 8. Number 7, Dave.
Number 7, I'm sorry, buddy. Alec Ayomanor.
It is Alec Ayomanor.
Alec Ayomanor. This guy's actually, it hurts me because A, he's Canadian. B, he's my kind of receiver. That I can't say his name, but I think I'm higher on him than most others. But watching him, the poster game for him would be when he played against Colorado against Travis Hunter, and he still put up 13 catches for almost 300 yards. Like that's insane. Like I read your article on top DBs, Travis Hunter being your number 1, and I think that's chalk, right? Like everyone thinks Travis Hunter's the number 1 DB. So to put up 300 yards, it's nuts. I kind of have him as a day 2 Ted McMillan. But I think he has a little bit different skill set. I have him as he can play X. He can play the big slot role. I have him as a Juju Smith-Schuster pre-knee injury. He just has the size, physicality combo that can win at any level of the field. He's a former track star. He's got great body control. He's got better yak and rack than you would expect. He's an able blocker. He's a great student athlete, and you kind of have to be going to Stanford. He won the student athlete award. He runs great routes, creates separation with fakes, with hard cuts, by using his tempo with his routes. I really like him. But again, he, as well as not Tez Johnson, who did we just do? Trey Harris. Sometimes getting separation off press can kind of be an issue. He doesn't really have a great release package or skills. Rather than using like skilled releases, he'll just kind of rely on his physicality. And he kind of lacks real explosiveness, kind of the same as Trey Harris, that he had a very limited route tree. So there's still some red flags, but I think you take him in the late second, early third, and develop those routes and releases. I think he could be a very productive receiver.
He's a guy that's climbing up draft boards a little bit right now. There's a couple of experts. PFF, for instance, actually has him as their number 5. So he's climbed up quite a bit. I saw NFL scouts and stuff were kind of singing his praises at the combine, just with the size and everything and speed and pretty solid production with not really a great quarterback room there at Stanford. So yeah, like this is a guy that I think he has a pretty high ceiling. Again, like we saw it like against Travis Hunter, right? Now that is Travis Hunter's kind of Achilles heel right now. It got better this year, but 2 years ago, that physical receiver was kind of an issue for him and how he plays. That was a good matchup for A.O. Manor, but like we've seen him do it against the best corner in this draft class, arguably, right? So
yeah.
I do think there's something there. I really do.
Agreed. And I'm kind of pulling for my Patriots to get him. Plus, he's Canadian, so I mean, I'm a little bit of a homer. But just the positional versatility, like you can slide him into pretty much any role, and he can do well there. And I think guys like that are harder to find. I think he'll do great.
You think he's like
I'm
a
glad that
second
he's
round
shooting
pick?
up draft boards, because then it kind of vindicates me being so high on him.
Yeah. Do you think he's a second round pick?
Yeah, late second, early third.
Okay. Yeah, could see it. I saw him going early in the second round in a couple mock drafts. So
Yeah, I could see that too, and especially the way he's shooting up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be upset if like the Patriots took him at 38 or whatever. Like, not at all.
Okay. Alec Aoman or Dave's number 7, despite being really high on him. A little further down the list than a couple of experts out there have him. Dave, who's your number 6?
My number 6, now this guy's might be a little higher than others, is Jalen Noel out of Iowa State.
Okay.
Again, I'm a little homer on Iowa State, and I don't think I've ever told you this, but the first college football game I ever watched was Iowa State, so I ended up being a little bit of a fan before I jumped onto the California bandwagon. But Jalen Noel, a little shorter than I would like at 5'11", but I'm going to overlook that. But he's the type of receiver that I love to watch. Just an elite route runner. He explodes out of his cuts. He'll fight for the ball in the air. He's got that very much, this is my ball mentality. And you love to see that out of receivers. He fights after the catch. He's not like the Trey Harris that'll fall forward for a couple of yards, but he'll put his head down, put his shoulder down, and push to make extra yards. He's just such a good competitor. He adds special teams value as a kick punt returner. And he ran very well at the combine. I think we talked about guys who had Tez Johnson who had better play speed. I think he actually ran better than what his play speed is. Like, his top speed is fine, but it's certainly not elite. But because he's so small, not so small, but because of his size, he's probably limited to a slot role. I have a comp of Tyler Lockett. Maybe he's not as shifty as Tyler Lockett was in his prime, but he's that kind of guy that will play the slot, get open, make those tough catches. I kind of bounce back and forth between Tyler Lockett and like a Julian Edelman type, where he plays bigger than his size would be. That I'm very high on Jalen Noel.
Yeah, and we've seen that role just kind of be a thing of the NFL for like 15, 20 years now, right? Lad McConkey is the newest iteration of that. very successful in his rookie season, playing that same sort of style in the slot. Just jitterbug, like good speed, obviously, but not elite, like good speed, great lateral agility, able to get that separation in the slot. And quarterbacks love that, right? Having kind of that guy that gets open right past the linebackers. Safeties can't cover him because he's too good of a route runner. It's a tough cover, right? So there's a lot of value there, right?
Play number one you learn, whether you're playing when you're playing schoolyard ball, is play number one is get open. And that's what Jalen Noel does. So if you can do that, you'll find a role.
All right, Jalen Noel, Dave's number 6. Number 5.
Number 5, and I think he's shooting up the boards after testing very well. But number 5, I got Matthew Golden out of Texas. So he has excellent speed. He was primarily used as the vertical threat at Texas early in his career, but then as he kind of developed and became a better route runner, we saw him expand his role. And he's actually become a pretty good route runner. He's got great hands. He's a natural hands catcher. Like some guys you watch catch the ball and you're like, this wasn't natural. But he just brings the ball in so naturally in his hands, and he can be explosive from anywhere on the field, whether it be taking a slant, taking a hitch, post, or even returning kicks. He's got that in his repertoire as well. But being undersized is, and I know teams are kind of shying away from this now, is like a big thing, but his blocking is kind of, it's not plus. He's not a plus blocker. He's not Matt Collins. And his release package still needs development. He kind of just relies on his speed to try and get that separation. So if he can improve that, and I think with NFL coaching it will. He also has a little bit of concentration drops. He likes to look upfield before he completely secures the catch. But the way he showed out in the college football playoffs, and my comp for him was Deion Branch, and I think that just fits very well. He's a little bigger than Deion, because Branch was like 5'9", but about the same weight. But a speedy, explosive athlete who can show up in big games. Deion Branch obviously winning a Super Bowl MVP. But just seeing the way that he is ascending and developing from just a strictly vertical threat to a pretty good route runner who can attack any level of the field, I like the way he's trending.
Yeah. A lot of teams are really high on him. He is kind of a guy after that combine performance, the classic kind of moving up the boards a little bit, which again, I'm a little skeptical of that just based on that. But if you like what you see on film, here's an explosive athlete at the NFL level even, and yeah, just climbing up the boards. So
yeah, put him at that Z spot and I think he'll do very well. I think he's pretty much cemented himself as a first round receiver and might get taken above my guys that are higher than him for various reasons, but I like what I see out of Golden.
All right, so Golden is your number 5.
Yes, sir.
And he's actually number 4 on a couple of boards right now, but so pretty close there. Who's your number 4?
And like, I'm not going to argue with him being higher on the board. That's just kind of where I have him right now. Number 4 is Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. He is my kind of receiver. I feel like we've been waiting for him to enter the draft for forever. Like, I feel like 2 years ago, he was on draft boards, and I was hoping, I'm like, oh, Patriots are going to draft Emeka Egbuka. Doesn't enter. So he really milked his time at Ohio State. He really is a Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I know that's a very lazy comp, but I don't want to be a contrarian for contrarian's sake. I promise you I try not to be. But they play very similar. Like, they're kind of this bigger slot, smooth athletes, run great routes, make catches in the tough area of the field. They're competitive. They willing and able to run block. And he's got sneaky speed. Like, he can both make yards after the catch, and he can separate without needing to showcase like elite route running, which he has. The things that I kind of worry about him is that he rarely worked outside. So I think he might be stuck into a Z off the line slot kind of role, which is fine, but it just doesn't push you up the board. And he's never really been a true number 1 receiver. So we'll see how that translates. So you're never really looking at him to be that number 1.
Yeah, to me, Ibuka is kind of he's not a superstar by any means, but I feel like his floor is so high, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy that at worst is an excellent number three, like an
Yeah.
excellent number three. So
Yep. I'd even say number 2, if he hits the ceiling, he'd be
yeah.
fine.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I was saying like floor though, like an
Oh,
excellent
4,
number
yeah.
three. I can't see him not having a successful career. Unless there's injuries or something like that. Like this guy is an NFL slot that offensive coordinators are just going to love and quarterbacks are going to love. Like I think this guy's just a can't miss.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
All right, so Emeka Ibuka, Dave's number 4. Dave, your number 3.
My number 3 is Luther Burden. Um, he was very productive for Missouri of all teams, and if you can produce at these smaller schools at receiver, it's something to look at. So he's another guy that can threaten anywhere on the field and can score from anywhere. He's kind of got a smaller running back frame, which is like a solid frame. He can kind of, and unlike what we see from Ibuka, we see him line up everywhere. We see him line up at X, Z, slot, ABC, wherever you want to put him. He'll produce for you. He's got natural hands. He's tough to tackle. He according to PFF, he had 30 missed tackles in 2024. That's pretty good, and he had limited reps in 2024, which I'm about to get to. Because, like, what happened this last year? He just took himself out of games, and there's no real answer as to why other than just frustration. And I don't want to touch on this too much, but I think it is something he has to answer for as to why he's healthy but not playing. His top speed isn't elite either. He is kind of reliant on double moves and crossers to kind of get that separation, and his route running does leave something to be desired. But he's just a really great athlete, natural hands catcher, and can threaten to score on anywhere from the field. So he's a very interesting prospect, but I'm not sure where you would want to take him.
Sounds very like Deebo Samuel-esque to me.
Kind of. Deebo's got a bigger frame and can take the handoffs and run much more from a running back. But down the field, I would say, yeah.
Kind of that receiver that's not like a huge route runner or not an elite route runner by any means, but great athlete with the ball in his hands. You just have to find a way to actually get it to him. Yeah,
that kind of thing. Yeah.
That's fair. So what do you think the floor and the ceiling is for him?
I think the floor is that he just kind of is a burnout, doesn't get open. I'm trying so hard to not make any sweeping declarations about his personality, but where there's smoke, there's fire, and you hear enough whispers, and that is most likely why he's tumbling down some boards right now.
Yeah.
But you put on the film, and the reps that he does have are very exciting and very explosive. So I think his ceiling, he puts that all together and puts it all behind him. But he has that Pittsburgh Steeler kind of thing where you see it and it looks great, but also you hear about the stuff back, off the field, and you eye with some trepidation,
Yeah, no, that's fair. And like we were both coaches, right? So like we kind of get that again at the high school level, not the pro level. But you see the personalities. So you gotta have a good personality manager. Mike Tomlin is actually really good at that. You mentioned Pittsburgh, but anyway, I digress. So number 3 is Luther Burden. Number 2, Dave.
Number 2 is Ted McMillan out of Arizona. So fans are always desperately looking for the next like Calvin Johnson and are enamored always with like these big X receivers. And I don't think that McMillan is that, but people will want to put him there. And he's got the big body. He's got the ball skills. He has the playmaking ability. But he's not the Randy Moss in that he has the explosiveness, top speed that you're looking for, right? I kind of put on my weaknesses in my article that he's more of a train than a Ferrari, if that makes sense. Like, he's not sexy. He's not going to get up to top speed. He's not going to blow anybody kind of away. and he relies so much on his size and strength in order to get open. But he has some skills that you really look for, right? Like he's the big body, he's got the large catch radius, body control, boxes out defenders like he's in the paint. Basketball reference. I'm number one basketball fan up in here. And he's a better athlete for his size, right? Like we saw him get moved into the slot a lot as well because they just wanted to be able to get him the ball. And at Arizona, you don't have a lot of star talent, right? So you're moving him around everywhere, trying to get him the ball, and he looked great in the slot. He's actually a good route runner for his size. He snaps his routes pretty good. There's just too many things that prevent him from being that blue chip prospect for me to put him up there.
Okay, so all right, some fair points there. What do you think for him then? Like, what should fans actually expect? He's obviously not Calvin Johnson, as you said. What is he then?
I think the best thing you can look for him is a Drake London, and that's a very popular comp that's going around. He has the measurables you want. He can win at all levels of the field. He can win from multiple positions. I just don't see him being that number one type guy. I think if you put him in an offense that has other weapons and ways to use other people, that you'll really see him shine. Like you see Drake London at Atlanta, you have, even Ray McLeod doing well. But you have like the Kyle Pitts, and you have who's the running back? Why am I blanking?
Mooney and Bijan.
Mooney and Dejan and Bijan
Robinson, yeah.
Bijan Robinson. Like there's weapons around that can kind of distract or move coverage off him, right? And he's productive in that. And I think that's probably what you can expect out of Ted McMillan.
Okay, so Ted McMillan, your number two. Now, before we go to your number one, little bit of a best of the rest here. One guy I am very surprised is not on your list, Dave, is Xavier Restrepo. I feel like that guy is right up your alley as a Patriots fan. Julian Edelman, Deion Branch lover. Why is Restrepo not in your top 10?
Restrepo, I kind of fought to not put up because I thought he was too much of a homer pick. My comp for him is actually Danny Amendola.
Okay.
I do love Restrepo, but I think he's just too far down the board for me.
Okay.
He's a little smaller as well. I'm pulling up my notes on him right now. Sorry.
It's okay. Could always edit this out.
But I mean, you look at the Julian Edelmans and the Danny Amendolas, right? And they were drafted kind of down the board. He doesn't have great speed. He's small. He can't win from the outside at all. And I just wonder if he can match that production that Miami had for him in the NFL. I do think that Edelman's a good comp, but there's a reason he was picked so well. I mean, he was a QB, and you're kind of projecting that. So I think he'll be drafted in the 4th-ish round. He's probably my number 12 after Higgins.
Okay.
But I think you need to get him in a system that would know how to use him. So yeah, if he ends up being going to the Patriots, Josh McDaniels will know how to use him. You put him with McVay, and I think he'd be a fine Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua next up and coming, right? But I do love Restrepo.
Okay. I was just wondering. I was just so shocked not to hear him on your list. Well, here we go. Let's get to number one. I think it's kind of obvious who number one is if Tet's number two. Number one, Dave.
Yeah, number one, and this might cause some controversy, is Travis Hunter. Regardless of what position he plays, I think he's the top-ranked player. He's just so explosive as a receiver. He finds space. He makes his QB's life so easy. He can score with any touch. More often than not, he'll find a way to come down with the ball. And I think that really translates to DBs. We'll get to your DBs in another episode. He's not a finished product. He does have a small frame. And you wonder about the balance between offense and defense. But I think that if you committed him full-time to offense, he would be just fine. I think he plays a lot like Devontae Smith of the Eagles. You can line him up anywhere, and he's just going to make plays for you. And if you're a team in that top 5 that's just is so desperate for a playmaker. Like, if we're looking at Cleveland or we're looking at New England, hell, even if you're looking at Tennessee, because their receiving core is pretty bare too, he'll make plays for you.
Yeah. This is Hunter's a player where, like, if we're still coaching high school ball together, this is a guy that we're just at each other's throat. Like, no, he's on my side of the ball. He's my guy. And then he ends up playing both sides of the ball, not coming off the field, and just gets absolutely exhausted for you. But
Pretty much.
The fact that he did that at the college level is insane. I don't think he can do that at the NFL level. I think personally, I like what you wrote, actually. I think he's a DB that plays 15 to 20 plays a game on offense that you script for him. That kind of seems right for me. But again, like, he can do both at an elite level, right? He's not going to be able to do both at the same time, but one or the other, wherever a team decides he's a best fit for them, he's going to be a superstar, right? So I see it on offense and defense with him. I think it's just going to come down to what the team wants him to do.
Yeah, and I think that what I wrote is exactly the way he will be used. He'll play he'll play cornerback full time, and then moonlight as a receiver, but very easily could do the other way around, even though that is tougher to moonlight as a DB with trying to game plan and everything and learn everything. But I think if you put him full-time offense, he would be just fine. And just the playmaking ability, you can't snuff at, you know? There will always be a reason to get him on the field.
For me, it's him and Abdul Carter as kind of the potential generational talents in this class. It's just those two really for me.
Yeah.
So
they're the only blue chip players, and some people try to make the argument for Mason Graham, but I'm not sure I buy into that too much, but we'll get to interior defensive lineman, I'm sure, another day, but
we'll get there.
We'll get there.
I think I'm higher on him than you. But anyway, we will get there. Guys, thank you for listening to the Film Grinders podcast. This was your top 10 receivers list. Tell us what you guys think. Who's in your top 10? Who's your number one? Is Travis Hunter a receiver or a DB? I don't know. Let us know what you guys think. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time for our first mock draft of the year, post first couple days of free agency here. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Film Grinders podcast. Make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms. From me and the guys, thank you. We'll see you next time.